obviously it's all the nations that are in the Commonwealth, so it's going back to the old British Empire and stuff. But it's for us the one opportunity that we break down into, instead of representing Great Britain, it's Scotland and England, Northern Ireland, Wales, and even some of the smaller islands around the UK. So it's really nice to to represent Scotland and do something different. It's similar to the Olympics, that it's a large multi-sport event. It's probably the next largest after the Olympics or maybe the World University Games. So it has the same feeling of that. I believe there's over 70 nations in the Commonwealth, so pretty quite a large competition base. But yeah, just a big, large competition. The sort of feeling out there is the same with the athlete village and all the venues and everything like that. So yeah, it's just a nice event, something that I hadn't done before. So something that I was definitely very keen to do, and obviously to represent Scotland is really great as well.
Talk a little bit about that. I mean, you represent Great Britain all the time, obviously. You shoot on the World Cup circuit with them at World Championships, at the Olympics, but then this is your opportunity to represent Scotland.
Sure.
What kind of pride is associated with that, or anything?
Yeah, a lot of pride. That's I'm very much Scottish as I'm British, but I think Scottish people definitely have a lot of pride in being Scottish. There's a lot of history and tradition and stuff. And when I grew up, that was kind of the sort of first, rung on the ladder. You'd represent your school or your county team, and then, then I'd start to represent the Scottish team, either at age level and then eventually at senior level. And then that would sort of be the stepping stone to representing Great Britain. So yeah, it's very special. And just to come sort of full circle, like you said, most of what I do now is with the Great Britain team, whether it's the World Cup circuit or anything else. So to come back and represent Scotland again after doing it as a junior and sort of growing up is really nice.
The games were in India this year. I know, I heard and I read that it was a bit of a struggle to get them off the ground and everything. Can you was that your first time in India, and just talk a little bit about the environment?
Yeah, it was my first time in India. Definitely a different experience. I mean, like you said, even from before we even went out there was a lot of discussions of whether we were even going to go, whether we were going to get delayed a few days. I mean, we were basically in limbo for the 2 days before our flights left. As we heard all the stuff in the media, really just like anyone else, about what was going on out there. So it was definitely interesting to get there. Once we did, for the most part, things were okay. There was a lot of anticipation. We didn't really know what to expect. But yeah, when we got there, things were pretty much okay. The village definitely wasn't quite finished. There was lots of little corners here and there, whether it was the landscaping or putting down tiles or painting bits over or filling in cracks. There was, a little of those aesthetic things that, but functionally it was fine. I think for us anyway, our Scottish management had been out there for a week beforehand, and they'd really done a great job with our accommodation block in terms of just cleaning it and getting it ready and getting it livable. I mean, from what we heard, it really wasn't even livable before we got there. So it was nice to that everything was done. Our management did a great job with that. And once you get there, you really just have to forget that stuff and get on with it. We've as shooting teams, we typically don't stay in 5-star hotels or luxury, so there was the apartments were fine. Had a shower, had beds, TV, and all that kind of stuff. So it was fine. Culturally, obviously, it's very different over there. It was a hot climate. And yeah, things are just crazy, from the traffic and just the way of life, and we don't really experience that fully as we're sort of enclosed in the athlete village, and we really get on a bus from the village, you know, in a secure location as it were, and go straight to our venues. So, but you know, you still see parts of the city and the culture, and yeah, it's definitely pretty different over there.
Do you have like a funny story or something that, I mean, you were there for a while.
Yeah, sure. I think the biggest cause of amusement was definitely the traffic. I mean, they would squeeze about 5 lanes of traffic into what was actually 3 lanes, and they did manage to do a games lane, so one of the outside lanes was kept open just for all the traffic associated with the games, all the buses for the athletes or officials or anything like that. So, but there was definitely times we would have to squeeze past, and they had these little pretty old looking police cars that would, you know, go out in front and beep their horns, and but I mean, I definitely heard a few stories of, you know, a pedestrian being, you know, shoved out of the way, or, and I know one time, you know, the bus was coming through the games lane as it were, and just there was so many mopeds and cars that they were just overflowing into the lane, and we just hammered one in the back, and just, you know, there was nowhere for the moped to go but nowhere for the bus to go, and they just carried on plowing through and pretty much just knocking mopeds out of the way and whatever they needed to do to keep driving. So definitely kind of crazy with that kind of stuff, and you know, the security aspect was definitely pretty important. I think they were definitely worried about that. We had an armed guard on every bus, but the police cars and the enforcement, you know, it's weird. Either it doesn't look scary, or the locals aren't really that afraid of it, or whatever it is. It's not like you know, US or the UK, where if, you know, if there's a policeman out there that's armed and he's telling you to do something, you do it pretty quick. Whereas over there, they seem to just quite blasé about it. But interesting, to say the least.
It's funny. How's the crowd? I mean, I know reading on some of the sites that, you know, New Delhi had, even they had up the official sites and everything, they were really trying to push getting a lot of people there.
Yeah.
Was there a lot of interest in general? And
I would say a reasonable amount. There was definitely quite a few times that there were venues, you know, that didn't have very many spectators, and despite the organisers, you know, swearing up and down that, you know, tickets were sold out and, you know, you couldn't get in, you know, there was a lot of venues that had empty seats. But I think, you know, shooting's one of their bigger sports over there, same as China. It's a really big growing sport. So we had some pretty good crowds at the shooting events, especially the finals. They had a designated finals hall, similar, you know, to the Olympics and big venues, and, you know, that was pretty crowded for the finals. So it was definitely a good atmosphere. Very different from a World Cup or something, just that, you know, with the level of photographers and people wanting interviews and stuff after the match. We see that a little bit at a World Cup, but when you're at a multi-sport event like the Olympics or even the Commonwealth Games, you know, there's just a much higher level of interest from all the media out there. It doesn't really matter what the sport. If there's a medal won, then, you know, it doesn't really matter what the sport is. So you know, that was quite cool to experience, and yeah, the crowds were pretty good on the whole.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the competition. You go into the first one, the pairs, the rifle, 3-pound, and you win gold. Or, I'm sorry, you win bronze, but you won a medal. So you get that first medal right off the bat. How was that? How was the competition? I know pairs isn't something you normally do, really?
No, it's not. I mean, we do have team competitions occasionally at some of the bigger matches, but yeah, the pairs match at the Commonwealth Games is definitely different. There's a lot more riding on it. You know, it's, again, like at the Games, a medal's a medal, so it doesn't really matter whether it's the same level of importance is put on it, whether it's an individual or pairs. And it's, yeah, a little bit more of a pressure match, because you're, you know, like teams in college, you know, you're relying on a teammate, it's not just yourself. So, but no, it was a good result. We knew the Indians were going to be really hard to beat. You know, they're both top shooters. But then after that, it was quite open. So I think we were a little bit disappointed at the end, because we ended up tying with the English pair and then losing on the tiebreaker. So anytime you lose on a tiebreaker, it's tough, and especially, you know, with the English-Scottish rivalry, that was an interesting one too. And all the, you know, the English shooters and a lot of the British shooters, you know, we know them really well. We train with them all the time, and we're teammates when we shoot for Great Britain. So, you know, there was a good bit of banter for that, and we were a little bit disappointed, but at the same time, we were, after it all settled, we were pretty happy to win a medal. So it was kind of like, okay, we've won a medal, first match, and let's just kind of move on from there.
Mm-hmm.